Imagine a world where the ocean's greatest secrets aren't seen with the eyes, but felt deep inside, in the hollow spaces between waves. A place where every rise and fall of the water carries a message, one that only the most patient and attentive can understand. What if you could read the sea without looking, sense the unseen patterns beneath the surface, and hear whispers in the silence of the swell? This is the story of those hidden signals, and of a young apprentice who learned to navigate a vast and restless ocean, not by sight, but by a connection far beyond it. Prepare to discover a language spoken only by the water, a rhythm as old as time, waiting for those who dare to listen. The ocean was a vast, ever-changing entity, a living force that spoke in a language of motion and rhythm. For those who dared to cross it, the sea was both a guide and a challenge, its moods shifting like breath between calm and tempest. Among the many mysteries held within its depths and surface was a knowledge almost impossible to convey: how to understand the ocean's swells without ever seeing them. In the islands scattered across the Pacific, where vast stretches of open water separated distant lands, this knowledge was a matter of survival. Navigators and voyagers learned to listen not just with their ears, but with their whole bodies, attuned to the subtle undulations of the sea beneath them. It was a skill honed through experience, patience, and a profound respect for the natural world. The story begins with Micah, a young apprentice on the island of Raiatea in the Society Islands, whose eyes were never to see the world as others did. Born without sight, Micah faced challenges that others could scarcely imagine. Yet within his seeming limitation lay a deep connection to the sea, one that would teach him and those around him the true meaning of navigation beyond sight. Micah's earliest memories were filled with the sound of waves crashing against the reef, the feel of salt air on his skin, and the rhythmic creaking of wooden canoes being prepared for voyages. While other children learned to read the stars and the flight of birds, Micah learned to read the sea through touch and sound, feeling the pulse of the ocean in ways that sighted people often overlooked. His father, Tane, was a master navigator, respected throughout the islands for his deep knowledge of currents, swells, and celestial markers. When Micah expressed his desire to learn the craft, many doubted that a blind boy could ever master the complex skills required to guide a canoe across the open ocean. But Tane believed otherwise. He saw in Micah a unique potential, a sensitivity to the sea's subtleties that might even surpass the reliance on sight. Their lessons began early, often at dawn, when the sea was calm and the world quiet. Tane would take Micah to the shore, where they would sit in silence and let the sounds of the ocean fill their senses. The sea speaks in waves, Tan would say, and those waves carry messages for those who listen. Micah's hands learned to sense the gentle rise and fall of the water as it met the sand, the shift of currents moving beneath the surface. He learned to identify the hollow of the wave, the subtle swell that foretold the approach of weather changes or the presence of distant islands. Each sensation was a word in a language without letters, a message encoded in the motion of water. As Micah grew, so did his understanding of the ocean's rhythms. His other senses sharpened. His hearing could detect the faintest change in wind direction. His skin could feel the difference between smooth swells and choppy waves. The sea became his teacher in ways that no book or chart could capture. The apprenticeship was not without its struggles. On occasion, Micah's inability to see meant that he had to rely entirely on others for guidance, especially in moments of sudden change or danger. But Tane insisted that true mastery came from trust. Trust in the sea, in one's own body, and in the community of navigators. One of the greatest tests came during a voyage to the nearby island of Huahin. The journey was one of several days, crossing open water where no land was visible. For Micah, this was an opportunity to put his skills to the ultimate challenge. Before setting off, the navigators gathered under the shade of pandanus trees, studying the sky, the wind, and the sea's surface. Tane explained to Maika the importance of feeling the swells even when the stars were obscured or clouds masked the horizon. When sight fails you, he said, the ocean's voice becomes your eyes. The first days were filled with routine, paddling in sync with the rhythm of the canoe, listening to the splash of oars, and sensing the rise and fall of the water beneath. Maika sat near the center, where he could feel the canoe's subtle tilts and shifts most clearly. His hands rested lightly on the wooden frame, sensing the gentle pulses that spoke of distant storms and hidden reefs. As night fell, the sky blanketed in clouds, the stars vanished from view. For most navigators, this would have been a moment of uncertainty, but for Maika, it was a chance to deepen his reliance on the ocean's subtle signals. He closed his eyes and let the sound of the waves and the feel of the swell guide him. The canoe rocked gently, a hollow pulse beneath his fingers that seemed to echo the heartbeat of the sea itself. Tane watched closely, his own hands steadying the rudder, trusting his son's growing connection. He could see the calm concentration on Maika's face, the way his body moved with the canoe's flow as if they were one. On the third day, a shift in the wind brought stronger swells from the southeast. The canoe pitched and rolled more noticeably, and the apprentices tightened their grip on the paddles. Maika's body adjusted instinctively, leaning with the motion, feeling the ocean's conversation in every muscle and joint. The hollow of the wave grew more pronounced, an undulating rhythm that carried warnings of weather changes and shifting currents. Maika sensed the subtle changes before they were visible, a skill that surprised even the most experienced navigators. That evening, as the canoe moved steadily through a swell that seemed to rise and fall like a living creature, Maika spoke softly to his father. "The sea is telling us a story," he said. "A story I can feel but cannot see." Tane nodded, pride and wonder mingling in his eyes. "You listen well," he said. "That story will guide us safely home." The rest of the voyage continued with moments of calm and challenge, each swell a chapter in the ongoing dialogue between human and ocean. Maika's unique bond with the sea deepened, proving that navigation was not solely the domain of sight, but a harmony of senses and spirit. Back on Raiatea, Maika's journey became a testament to the resilience and adaptability of human connection to the environment. His story spread quietly among the islands, inspiring others to look beyond conventional limits and trust in the broader language of the world. What would it mean for future generations if the ocean's secrets were understood not just through sight, but through the full range of human perception? How might this deeper connection change the way people navigated, survived, and lived alongside the sea? The hollow of the wave held many answers, and Maika's journey was only the beginning of a story that would ripple through time like the gentle swell of the ocean itself. The sea had always been a mirror to Maika's world, vast, unpredictable, and full of subtle messages that few could decode. Each day on the water taught him more about the invisible language of the ocean, a dialect spoken in the rise and fall of swells, the whisper of the wind, and the nuanced shifts beneath the canoe's hull. Though his eyes could not see the horizon, his body and spirit had grown attuned to the rhythms that guided every voyage. After returning from his initial journey to Hua Hin, Maika's training deepened, moving beyond the basics of sensing waves to a profound understanding of ocean swell patterns and their causes. He learned that the sea's surface was shaped not only by local winds, but by distant storms, tidal forces, and the gravitational pull of the moon and sun. This knowledge was encoded in the movements beneath his hands and feet, in the patterns that repeated yet never quite the same. One morning, Kaile, a respected elder navigator who had traveled far across the Pacific, came to Raiatea to teach. His reputation for mastering the reading of ocean swells preceded him, and Maika was eager to learn from one who understood the sea's secrets with such clarity. Kaile approached the shore with the quiet confidence of one who had made the ocean his lifelong companion. Under the shade of coconut palms, Kaile began by explaining the nature of swell patterns, long, rolling waves that often originated from distant weather systems, traveling thousands of miles across the ocean. Unlike the shorter, choppier waves driven by local winds, swells carried information across vast distances, their rhythms telling stories of storms far beyond the island's sight. Micah listened intently, his fingers tracing the patterns on a wooden model Cale had crafted. The model depicted a cross-section of the ocean's surface, illustrating how swells formed and propagated. Though Micah could not see the physical waves, he could grasp the concept through touch and sound. Kylie then led the apprentices to the shore where the ocean was calm. The group boarded a large canoe, sturdy and designed for open water travel. As they pushed off from the beach, the gentle rocking of the vessel beneath Micah's hands confirmed the presence of swells, a quiet pulse that seemed to reach through the wood and into his bones. For hours, Cale guided the canoe across the water, pointing out subtle changes in the rhythm of the waves. "Feel how the swell's timing shifts," he said. "Notice when it grows taller, when it shortens, when it fades. These changes tell us where the energy comes from and where it goes." Micah's entire being tuned to these cues. He learned to recognize the swell's signature, a pattern unique to each weather system that generated it. Some swells carried a slow, deliberate beat, the mark of a distant cyclone. Others were quick and sharp, the trace of a storm fading rapidly. This skill was essential for navigation. Understanding swell patterns allowed navigators to predict weather changes and adjust their course accordingly, avoiding dangerous storms or taking advantage of favorable winds. For Micah, it was a revelation, a way to see the sea through its movement alone. Back on shore, the lessons continued. Cale taught the apprentices how to combine their tactile knowledge with other signs: the scent of the air, the direction of birds in flight, the temperature of the water, to build a fuller picture of the environment. Navigation was not a single skill, but a tapestry woven from many threads. One day, Cale shared a story from his own travels about a voyage through the open Pacific where the sky was blanketed by clouds for days. Without stars or sun to guide them, Cale and his crew relied solely on the swell patterns and their memory of the sea. The experience had been both terrifying and enlightening, a testament to the power of trusting the ocean's voice when sight was denied. Micah felt a kinship with that story, recognizing his own challenges mirrored in Cale's experience. It reinforced the idea that navigation was not about dominance over nature, but about harmony with it. Over the weeks, Micah's confidence grew. He practiced sensing the changes in the swell while paddling, matching the canoe's movements with the pulse of the ocean. He developed an acute awareness of how the hollow between waves felt underfoot, how the crest lifted the hull, and how the gaps in the swell signaled shifts in weather and direction. On one particularly clear morning, Kaylee took the apprentices to a secluded bay where the water was calm and transparent. He challenged Micah to close his eyes and rely solely on touch and sound to judge the sea's behavior. With his hands lightly gripping the canoe's edge and his feet balanced against the floorboards, Micah focused on the tiny variations in movement. For minutes, he felt nothing but the gentle rocking, then gradually sensed a subtle shift, a lengthening of the swell's rhythm, and a slight increase in the canoe's lift. It was the beginning of a distant storm's arrival, hours before the wind changed or the sky darkened. Cale smiled. "You have learned to listen well," he said. "The sea reveals its secrets to those who are patient and open." That afternoon, the sky darkened as predicted, and a brisk wind picked up, sending waves rolling across the bay. The apprentices secured the canoe and gathered under shelter, watching as the ocean transformed before their eyes. Micah sat quietly, feeling the echoes of the swell still present beneath the earth, a reminder that the sea's memory persisted even after the waves had passed. Micah's journey was not only a personal triumph, but a challenge to traditional views about perception and knowledge. His mastery of the ocean's swell patterns without sight demonstrated the profound capabilities of human adaptability and the depth of connection possible between person and environment. As his story spread throughout the islands, it inspired other navigators to broaden their understanding of sensory experience. The lessons Maika embodied suggested that navigation, and perhaps all knowledge, was richer when embraced with humility and openness to unexpected ways of knowing. What new horizons might be revealed if future voyagers embraced the full spectrum of human perception? How might this shape the relationship between people and the vast, mysterious ocean that had always held their destinies? The hollow of the wave whispered its answers, waiting for those who would listen with more than just their eyes. The days following the lessons with Kayla marked a subtle shift in Maika's understanding of the ocean's language. No longer was he simply reacting to the movement of the waves. He was beginning to anticipate them. The hollow of the swell, once a vague impression beneath his fingertips, became a precise rhythm that guided his every motion. His body learned to predict the sea's cadence, adjusting instinctively to each rise and fall, much like a musician attuned to a silent symphony. Yet this was no easy mastery. The ocean is a realm of constant flux, its surface shaped by countless forces beyond human control. A swell that seemed steady one moment could transform in an instant, altered by winds thousands of miles away, or the subtle gravitational pull of the moon. Maika's training demanded that he embrace uncertainty and cultivate patience, understanding that navigation was as much an art as a science. His fellow apprentices watched in quiet awe as Maika moved through the water with a grace that belied his blindness. It was said among the older navigators that the sea spoke to Maika in a voice clearer than most, and that his other senses had sharpened to extraordinary levels. The way he adjusted to shifting swells, sensed distant weather changes, and maintained balance on the moving canoe seemed almost mystical. One afternoon, as the group prepared for a practice voyage along the reef's edge, Maika was tasked with maintaining the canoe's balance during a section of choppy water. The swells here were irregular and unpredictable, a challenge even for experienced paddlers. Maika closed his eyes, tuning into the sea's subtle signals, the way the canoe's hull creaked under pressure, the splash patterns against the sides, and the vibrations transmitted through the wooden frame. He shifted his weight minutely, leaning forward as the hull dipped into a hollow, then back as it rose with a swell. His breath synchronized with the rhythm of the waves, steady and calm. Around him, the sound of oars dipped into the water in perfect harmony, the quiet encouragement of his teacher Tane reassuring him. The ride was not without its moments of tension. At one point, a sudden cross-swell caught the canoe unawares, tilting it sharply. Maika felt the moment of imbalance through his fingertips and responded instinctively, planting his feet firmly and shifting his body to counter the force. The canoe righted, gliding smoothly once more. As they returned to shore, Maika's companions offered quiet congratulations, their respect for his abilities deepening. But Maika knew this was only the beginning. The ocean's lessons were endless, and every journey brought new challenges and insights. Beyond the physical skills, Maika's training involved learning to interpret the sea's moods. The hollow of the wave was not just a mechanical pattern, but a living message, an indicator of changing weather, the presence of other vessels, or the proximity of land. Understanding these signals was crucial for survival, especially in times when the sky was obscured or stars hidden behind clouds. Maika spent hours each day sitting on the shore, hands immersed in seawater, letting the pulse of the ocean fill him. He learned to differentiate between swells generated by trade winds and those created by distant storms. Each carried a distinct pattern, a unique heartbeat that revealed its origin and direction. These skills were especially vital during nighttime voyages, when sight was limited even for those who could see. The ocean became a landscape navigated through feeling, sound, and memory. The stars were guides, but the waves told their own story, a narrative that could warn of impending danger or offer reassurance of a steady course. Tane reminded Maika that navigation was never solitary. The sea was a community of forces, and the navigator was a listener and interpreter, part of a larger dialogue between human and nature. "We do not command the ocean," Tanay often said. "We respond to it." This philosophy grounded Micah's journey. His blindness, once seen by others as a limitation, became a source of strength, a way to connect deeply with the environment and to trust senses often overlooked. One of the most profound moments came during a voyage to a remote atoll known for its tricky currents and hidden reefs. The sky was overcast, denying the usual guidance of stars. Micah sat near the canoe's center, hands lightly resting on the wooden frame, feet feeling every tilt and sway. The swell was subtle but insistent, a low hollow moving beneath them like a breathing creature. Suddenly, Micah sensed a change, a shift in the swell's pattern that indicated the presence of shallow water ahead. Without hesitation, he alerted the paddlers to adjust course slightly. Tane confirmed the reef's proximity moments later, steering the canoe safely around a dangerous coral formation. This episode was a testament to the practical power of Micah's skills, underscoring the importance of listening beyond what can be seen. For the island communities whose lives depended on the sea, such expertise was invaluable. As Micah's reputation grew, so too did interest in his methods. Scholars and navigators from other islands sought him out, curious about how he perceived the ocean's language. His approach challenged conventional ideas about sensory experience and expanded the understanding of human adaptability. But Micah remained humble, always crediting the sea as his greatest teacher. The hollow of the wave was a mystery he was still unraveling, a puzzle whose pieces shifted with the tides. The ocean's voice was constant, but its meaning was layered and complex. To truly understand it required patience, openness, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. What further secrets might the swell reveal to those patient enough to listen? How might the lessons of Micah's journey influence future generations who seek to navigate a world increasingly disconnected from nature's rhythms? The hollow of the wave continued to whisper, inviting explorers not only to look outward toward the horizon, but inward toward the deeper currents of knowledge and connection. The ocean's voice grew ever more distinct to Micah as the weeks turned to months. Each swell carried a message, a subtle cue that spoke of distant storms, shifting winds, or hidden reefs lurking beneath the surface. Though Micah's eyes could not behold the vast expanse, his entire being resonated with the undulating rhythms of the sea, allowing him to navigate not by sight, but by deep, embodied understanding. One morning, the navigators prepared for a journey to the island of Taha'a, a voyage that would test Micah's growing expertise in reading the ocean's hollow. The winds were calm at dawn, but the elders spoke of distant storms brewing far to the southeast, their swells beginning to ripple across the vast Pacific. This was the moment when subtlety mattered most, when the smallest change in the wave's pattern could spell safety or disaster. Micah and his fellow apprentices boarded the canoe as the sun crept above the horizon, casting long golden beams over the water's surface. As the canoe slipped into the gentle swells, Micah closed his eyes, allowing the hull's movement to wash over him like a steady heartbeat. His hands gripped the wooden frame lightly, and his feet felt every nuance of the wave's rise and fall. The hollow of the wave was not a uniform motion, but a complex conversation between energy and form. Some swells were long and slow, their peaks rolling gradually like the calm breath of a sleeping giant. Others were short and sharp, the remnants of storms that had passed, yet left their mark on the ocean's surface. With each passing hour, Micah's senses sharpened. He distinguished between the rhythm of trade wind swells and the growing pulse of storm-generated waves far beyond sight. These distant forces were transmitted across the water, their energy moving in patterns that could be felt if one knew where and how to listen. The canoe's paddlers fell into a quiet harmony, their strokes synchronized with the ocean's cadence. Micah's body moved with the swell, leaning into the hollow, steadying himself against the crests. He had learned that to resist the wave was to fight the ocean. To move with it was to find balance and safety. At midday, the sky began to darken with heavy clouds, and a cool breeze whispered of the approaching storm. The ocean's surface grew restless, the swells rising and falling with greater force. Maika's hands and feet absorbed the changing patterns, the quickening pace of the waves, the hollow growing deeper beneath the canoe. The elders exchanged knowing glances. This was the moment when true skill was tested. The canoe needed to navigate carefully to avoid the roughest swells that could capsize the vessel or throw the paddlers off rhythm. Maika concentrated deeply, sensing a subtle but unmistakable shift in the swell's form. The hollow was changing, becoming more uneven, its rhythm disrupted by underlying currents and gusts of wind. He communicated this to Tane and the others through a series of soft taps and shifts in weight, a code they had developed to convey ocean conditions without speech. Tane nodded, adjusting the canoe's direction to align with the swells, reducing the risk of dangerous rolling or pitching. The paddlers responded, their movements fluid and responsive, guided by Maika's perception of the wave's hidden messages. As the storm approached, the ocean's voice grew louder, more urgent. Waves rose higher, their hollows deepened into troughs, and the canoe moved like a leaf caught in a complex dance of forces. The rhythm was no longer gentle but charged with energy and risk. Maika's mind was calm, focused entirely on the tactile feedback from the canoe's movement. Each swell was a word in a sentence, each shift a punctuation mark in the ocean's ongoing story. He learned to read not only the immediate motion, but the undercurrents beneath, the subtle cross swells and hidden eddies that could spell danger. Hours passed, and the storm's edge finally reached them. Rain fell in steady sheets, wind howled around the canoe, and visibility dropped to near zero. For sighted navigators, this would be a perilous moment, a test of courage and experience. For Maika, it was a challenge of trust in the ocean's voice, in his body's instincts, and in the skill of his companions. The canoe pitched and rolled, sometimes violently, as they rode the storm's swells. Maika's hands gripped the edges tightly, feet braced against the floor, muscles engaged in constant adjustment. The hollow beneath seemed alive, pulsing with energy and warning. Through the chaos, Tane's calm voice offered direction, guiding the paddlers to angle the canoe into the swells at just the right moment. Maika mirrored these movements, feeling the precise timing needed to avoid capsizing or being thrown off course. The storm lasted for several hours, the ocean's fury testing every skill and nerve. Yet, throughout it all, Maika's connection to the hollow of the wave remained unbroken. He was not merely surviving the storm, he was moving with it, part of the great oceanic rhythm. When the rain finally ceased and the clouds began to break, the sea calmed in response. The swells softened, their hollow easing back into long, gentle undulations. The canoe floated peacefully, the paddlers weary but unbroken. In the aftermath, Maika reflected on the journey. The ocean had spoken clearly during the storm, its voice carried on the swell's hollow beats. His ability to feel and interpret those messages had been vital, not just for his own safety, but for the entire crew. This experience reinforced the profound lesson that navigation was a dance of awareness and adaptation, a partnership between human and nature. The hollow of the wave was not simply a physical phenomenon, but a living, breathing entity, a source of knowledge accessible to those willing to listen deeply. Maika's story spread quietly through the islands, a reminder that the ocean's secrets were not reserved for those with sight alone. They belonged to anyone who could open themselves to the world's subtle languages, who could trust in senses beyond the obvious. As the sun set over the horizon, casting a warm glow on the calm sea, Maika knew his journey was far from over. Each voyage brought new lessons, new whispers from the hollow of the wave. What future journeys awaited him, and how might the knowledge of ocean swells without sight transform the way people understood and respected the sea? The ocean's rhythm was eternal, a ceaseless pulse connecting past, present, and future. Maika's story was but one note in this vast symphony, an invitation to listen more closely and move with the world's hidden harmonies. Maika's connection to the ocean deepened in ways that transcended the physical. The hollow of the wave was no longer just a pattern to feel beneath his hands and feet. It became a living narrative, a complex dialogue between sea and sailor. The lessons he absorbed were not merely technical, they were imbued with a spiritual significance, linking him to generations of navigators who had relied on these subtle cues to traverse the vast Pacific. The islanders believed that the ocean was a sacred being, a vast entity with moods and memories. Its voice came through the waves, the swells, and the very air that carried the salt and the scent of distant lands. For Maika, this was more than myth. The swell's hollow communicated weather changes, the presence of other vessels, and even stories of past voyages transmitted through its unending rhythm. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, casting an amber light over the water, Maika sat by the shore with his mentor Tane. The sea was calm, but a faint swell could be felt beneath the surface, a gentle rise and fall like the steady breath of a sleeping giant. They spoke softly about the importance of patience in mastering the ocean's language. "Listen carefully," Tane advised, "for the swell tells us what the eye cannot see. It carries warnings and wisdom from far beyond these islands." Maika closed his eyes, his hands resting on the smooth wood of the canoe beside him. The hollow of the wave pulsed faintly, a subtle motion that required stillness to perceive. In this silence, he felt connected to the ocean's timeless rhythms and the ancestors who had once sailed these waters without compass or map. Training sessions with the apprentices often revolved around learning to detect these subtle messages. Maika taught others how to focus on the tactile sensations of the canoe's movements, how to interpret the swell's timing, and how to recognize the signs of approaching weather changes. For many, these lessons were new and challenging. The sea's language was not taught in schools or written in books. It had to be felt, experienced, and internalized through years of practice and immersion. During voyages, Maika became increasingly adept at sensing shifts in swell patterns that signaled changes in wind direction or impending storms. He could distinguish between swells generated by local winds and those originating from distant cyclones, their unique signatures carried across thousands of miles. This ability was vital for safe navigation, especially during cloudy nights when stars were hidden. The hollow of the wave provided a constant guide, a rhythm to follow when visual cues failed. One particularly memorable journey took Maika and the navigators to the island of Maupiti. The voyage required crossing open ocean for several days, with limited visibility and unpredictable weather. As they set out, the swell was steady, a familiar rhythm beneath the canoe. On the second night, dense clouds obscured the stars, leaving the voyagers without their usual celestial guides. Maika sat quietly, relying solely on the feel of the ocean's movements. The hollow of the wave was steady but began to show subtle changes, a lengthening of the swell interval, a deepening of the troughs. He communicated these observations to Tane and the paddlers, who adjusted their strokes and the canoe's heading accordingly. This intuition helped the group avoid a dangerous cross swell that could have thrown them off course. The following days tested Maika's growing expertise as weather shifted rapidly. Rain showers brought choppy seas, while sudden gusts pushed the canoe off its intended path. Through it all, Maika's sense of the hollow swell guided them, a constant pulse beneath the chaos. Back on shore, the village elders praised Maika's skill, recognizing the unique contribution of his heightened sensory perception. His journey challenged traditional notions of ability and demonstrated the rich diversity of human experience in understanding the world. The lessons extended beyond navigation. Maika's story inspired others to rethink how knowledge was acquired and shared. It encouraged the community to honor all ways of perceiving the environment and to value patience, attention, and humility in learning from nature. As Myika continued his training, he encountered new challenges. Not every swell was easy to interpret, and some waves carried conflicting signals. Storms born far across the ocean could merge with local winds, creating complex patterns that required careful discernment. To navigate these complexities, Myika developed mental maps of swell patterns based on their timing, size, and shape. He learned to combine this with other environmental cues: the smell of rain carried on the wind, the flight paths of seabirds, the temperature of the water against his skin. This holistic approach was at the heart of Polynesian navigation, where multiple sensory inputs were woven together into a coherent understanding of the environment. Myika's progress also led him to question the limitations placed on knowledge by conventional senses. His blindness had initially been seen as a barrier, but he now understood it as a doorway to a different way of knowing, one that embraced uncertainty and celebrated the richness of non-visual perception. The hollow of the wave had become a teacher, a guide, and a companion on every journey. Its messages were never static. They shifted with the tides, the seasons, and the changing moods of the ocean. To listen deeply was to accept a lifelong apprenticeship with nature itself. Myika's story remains a quiet reminder that knowledge is not confined to the obvious or the visible. It lives in the spaces between, in the gentle swell beneath a canoe, in the whispered rhythm of the sea. How might this deeper, more inclusive understanding of navigation reshape the ways future generations relate to the ocean? What lessons lie hidden in the hollow of the wave, waiting for those patient enough to hear? The ocean continues its eternal dance, and with it, the call for us to listen, to feel, and to navigate the world in all its subtle complexity. Myika's journey with the ocean swells was unfolding as a profound education in resilience and connection. Each voyage was a lesson in humility before the vast living force that was the sea. His fingers, once merely tools for touch, had become instruments finely attuned to the invisible energies that shaped the waves. The hollow of the wave was no longer simply a physical phenomenon, but a language, a subtle communication between water and navigator that transcended sight. With each new dawn, Myika practiced the art of sensing the ocean's moods. The mornings were often calm, with gentle swells that felt like the ocean's slow breathing. But even in these quiet moments, the pulse beneath the canoe held secrets, tales of distant storms, the approach of shifting trade winds, or the subtle rise of tides. Myika learned to listen to these rhythms, interpreting their meanings through the soft sway beneath his hands and the pressure changes beneath his feet. One of the defining challenges came during a voyage to the remote island of Bora Bora. The route was well known to the elders, but still posed risks due to complex currents and unpredictable weather patterns. The ocean here was a patchwork of influences. Local wind-driven waves collided with swells generated hundreds of miles away, creating a tapestry of movements that required careful navigation. As they pushed off from Raiatea, the canoe was steady, riding long, even swells that rolled gently beneath them. Myika sat near the center, eyes closed, focusing entirely on the sensations transmitted through the hull. The hollow between waves was a steady rhythm, a heartbeat that guided their progress. Hours into the journey, Myika began to notice slight irregularities in the swell. The intervals between crests grew longer, and the depth of the hollows shifted subtly. These were signs of a distant weather system influencing the ocean surface, and Myika relayed his observations to the paddlers through the gentle shifts in his body and the soft taps on the canoe. The crew adjusted their strokes, angling the canoe to align more closely with the swell's direction. This minimized the risk of sudden rolls or jolts that could destabilize the vessel. Myika's sensitivity to these nuances was crucial. It was a skill that had been honed through months of dedicated practice and a deep respect for the ocean's rhythms. Midway through the voyage, clouds gathered on the horizon, signaling the approach of a storm. The wind began to pick up, and the swells grew larger and more complex. Maika's hands felt the increasing power of the waves as they rocked the canoe, the hollow deepening into a pronounced trough that demanded constant adjustment. Despite the growing challenge, Maika remained calm, his body moving instinctively to counterbalance the canoe's shifts. He communicated the changes in swell pattern to the paddlers, helping them maintain a steady course through the choppy waters. The storm brought a fierce rain that blurred the boundaries between sea and sky. Visibility dropped to nearly zero, and the usual landmarks were obscured. For many navigators, this would have been a moment of uncertainty or fear. For Maika, it was an opportunity to rely fully on his trained senses and the lessons of the hollow wave. The canoe surged forward, its crew working in silent coordination. Maika's perception of the swell's rhythm became their guide, a constant in the shifting chaos. He could feel the way the wave's energy shifted with the changing wind, the way the ocean's pulse responded to the storm's force. Hours passed as they navigated through the tempest. The canoe rose and fell with the waves, sometimes pitching sharply, other times gliding smoothly on long swells. Maika's hands gripped the edges tightly, his feet braced, muscles engaged in a constant dance of balance. When the storm finally passed, the ocean gradually calmed and the sky cleared. The crew let out a collective sigh of relief, but Maika's mind remained focused. He reflected on the intimate relationship between navigator and ocean, a relationship built on trust, patience, and a willingness to listen deeply. The voyage to Bora Bora became a testament to the power of non-visual navigation. Maika's ability to interpret the hollow of the wave had not only ensured their safety, but had also deepened the community's respect for alternative ways of knowing. Back on land, the elders gathered to hear Maika's account. His detailed descriptions of the swell patterns, the timing of changes, and the tactile cues that guided their path provided valuable insights. They recognized that his method expanded the traditional knowledge of navigation, adding layers of depth and sensitivity. Maika's story began to inspire a new generation of navigators to broaden their perceptions. It became clear that navigation was not solely a visual endeavor, but a multi-sensory practice that embraced the full range of human experience. The journey also highlighted the interconnectedness of the ocean and weather systems across the Pacific. Swells generated by storms thousands of miles away could travel great distances, their energy felt in the hollow between waves. This knowledge underscored the importance of understanding the ocean as a dynamic, interconnected system rather than a static backdrop. In the months that followed, Maika continued to refine his skills. He practiced reading the ocean under varying conditions, calm seas, stormy weather, changing tides, and learned to combine these tactile sensations with other environmental clues like bird flight, cloud formations, and the scent of rain on the breeze. His training sessions with other apprentices grew more sophisticated. They developed exercises to heighten sensitivity to the swell's nuances and built a vocabulary of physical cues to communicate complex ocean conditions silently. Maika also explored the cultural and spiritual dimensions of navigation. The ocean was not just a physical space, but a realm imbued with ancestral presence and sacred meaning. The hollow of the wave was a living testament to this connection, a rhythm that linked past voyagers to present journeys and future explorations. Through this blend of practical skill and cultural wisdom, Maika embodied a holistic approach to navigation. He showed that the sea's language was accessible to all who were willing to listen, not only with their eyes, but with their whole being. As the sun set on another day of practice, Maika stood on the shore, feeling the last gentle pulses of the swell beneath his feet. The ocean whispered its endless stories, inviting him to continue the journey of discovery and understanding. What new lessons might the hollow of the wave reveal in the days to come? How might Maika's example encourage others to embrace the richness of sensory experience in navigating both the sea and life itself. The sea's rhythm persisted, an eternal guide for those who choose to listen with patience and humility. Micah's mastery of the ocean's subtle signals continued to grow as he spent more time immersed in the rhythms of the swell. Each journey brought new challenges, new lessons woven into the endless pulse beneath the canoe. The hollow of the wave was a language that demanded patience, attentiveness, and a willingness to surrender control to forces far greater than oneself. The apprenticeship was rigorous, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally. Micah learned to quiet the mind, to enter a state of deep focus where every sensation was magnified and every movement of the ocean translated into meaning. It was an exercise in presence, being fully attuned to the moment and the shifting environment. One early morning, before the first light, the apprentices prepared for a voyage along the western reef, a route known for its complex currents and hidden dangers. The air was cool and still, the ocean calm, but Micah sensed a subtle tension in the swell, a low murmur of energy that suggested change. As they paddled away from the shore, the canoe glided over gentle swells, their rhythm slow and steady. Micah closed his eyes, focusing on the hollow between waves, the space where the canoe dipped, the trough that whispered of the ocean's breath. His hands rested lightly on the edges of the hull, feet sensing the shifts beneath. The journey required constant adjustment. Currents flowed beneath the surface, unseen, but felt as subtle changes in the swell's timing and shape. Micah learned to distinguish these hidden forces, understanding how they could alter the canoe's course, if not accounted for. As they neared the reef, the swell patterns became more complex. The interaction between ocean swells and reef-generated waves created a patchwork of movements, some rising sharply, others falling abruptly. This was the domain where many novice navigators faltered, misreading the signals or reacting too late. Micah's body moved in harmony with the waves, shifting weight in time with the hollow's pulse. His senses were heightened, every nerve attuned to the ocean's shifting moods. When the swell quickened or deepened, he responded immediately, adjusting his stance to maintain balance. The paddlers followed his lead, their strokes synchronizing with Micah's subtle cues. This silent communication was essential in navigating the treacherous reef waters, where a single misstep could result in injury or damage to the canoe. Despite the physical demands, Micah found a deep calm in this dance with the ocean. The hollow of the wave was both challenge and comfort, a reminder that the sea was alive, responsive, and ever-changing. To navigate it required respect, patience, and an openness to its mysteries. Halfway along the reef, the swell suddenly shifted. A distant storm had sent a series of larger waves rolling toward them, their hollow deeper and more forceful. The canoe rocked noticeably, the rhythm changing from a gentle lull to a vigorous pulse. Micah's hands and feet registered the change instantly. He signaled to the paddlers through slight shifts in his weight and a sequence of taps on the wooden frame, a code they had perfected for communicating ocean conditions. The paddlers adjusted their efforts, matching the new rhythm and angling the canoe to ride the swells safely. Micah's intuition, sharpened through months of training, guided these adjustments with precision. The approaching waves grew in height and power, but the crew remained steady, moving as one with the ocean's force. The hollow of the wave was no longer a passive signal, but a dynamic partner in their journey. As the storm swells passed, the ocean gradually settled. The canoe resumed its glide over calmer water, the hollow returning to its slower, steady beat. Micah exhaled, feeling a profound gratitude for the ocean's lessons and the trust between navigator and crew. That evening, around the fire, the elders spoke of the importance of balance, not only in the canoe, but in life. The ocean's hollow was a metaphor for the interplay between stability and change, between control and surrender. Micah reflected on this as he prepared for sleep. The swell's rhythm echoed in his mind, a soothing cadence that lulled him into a state of restful awareness. His journey was far from over, and the ocean's language held countless more stories to discover. In the days that followed, Micah's training extended beyond the canoe. He learned to interpret other signs of the ocean's moods, the calls of seabirds signaling land, the scent of rain carried on the breeze, and the temperature changes in the water. These additional cues enriched his understanding, allowing him to anticipate shifts before they manifested fully in the swell. Navigation became a holistic practice, weaving together multiple senses and sources of information into a coherent whole. Micah's growing skill inspired others in the village. Young apprentices sought to learn from him, eager to develop their own sensitivity to the ocean's voice. His example challenged assumptions about ability and perception, showing that deep connection to the environment transcended physical limitations. The community began to view navigation not simply as a technical skill, but as a form of dialogue with nature, a way of listening, responding, and honoring the sea's vast intelligence. As the sun rose over the reef one morning, Micah stood at the water's edge, feeling the swell beneath his feet and the breeze on his skin. The ocean's hollow whispered promises of new voyages and fresh discoveries. What further mysteries would the swell reveal? How might Micah's journey continue to deepen the understanding of the ocean's subtle language, bridging generations and expanding the boundaries of human perception? The sea's eternal rhythm beckoned, inviting all who listened to move gently with its endless dance. The ocean's vastness often seemed to swallow the senses whole, but for Micah, it became a place of quiet clarity. With every journey, he honed his awareness of the hollow of the wave, transforming what once felt like an intangible mystery into a tangible guide. The swell beneath the canoe was a pulse, a heartbeat that connected the past voyagers with the present, and through him, to the future. On this particular voyage, the destination was the island of Joaquin, a journey that required crossing a stretch of open ocean known for its unpredictable conditions. The elders warned that the swell there was often a complex mosaic of influences, wind-driven waves intersecting with distant swells, creating a dynamic and sometimes treacherous environment. The crew prepared before dawn, the air thick with anticipation. Micah sat quietly at the canoe's center, closing his eyes to focus entirely on the tactile language of the waves. The early morning swell was gentle, long and rolling like the slow breath of the ocean itself. It carried stories of far-off storms and distant lands, whispered through the hollow beneath their vessel. As the canoe glided forward, Micah felt the nuanced differences between the swells. Some were soft and rounded, easy to ride and predictable. Others were sharper, their hollows deeper, hinting at stronger winds or underwater currents at play. Each swell was a sentence, each hollow a pause or emphasis in the ocean's ongoing conversation. Navigating these patterns required more than physical balance. It demanded a quiet mind and an open heart. Micah had learned to enter a meditative state where the boundaries between himself and the sea blurred. He was both observer and participant in the ocean's rhythm, moving fluidly with its ever-changing pulse. Midway through the journey, the swell began to shift. A series of shorter, choppier waves rose up, their hollows uneven and unpredictable. Micah's hands and feet registered the change immediately, sending signals to the paddlers to adjust their strokes and angle the canoe accordingly. These swells were the result of a local wind that had picked up strength, pushing against the broader, longer waves generated by a distant storm. The combination created a challenging environment where the hollow of the wave was irregular, its rhythm broken into a complex pattern. Micah's skill was tested as he navigated through this mosaic. He learned to distinguish the different components of the swell, separating the influence of wind-driven waves from that of distant swells, allowing him to anticipate changes and guide the canoe safely. The paddlers moved in sync with Micah's cues, their strokes adapting to the hollow's uneven beat. The canoe rocked and pitched, but remained steady, a testament to their growing harmony with the ocean's movements. As the sun climbed higher, the wind strengthened and the swells grew larger. The hollow deepened, becoming more pronounced beneath the canoe. Maika's senses were alert to every nuance, the subtle variations in pressure, the shifting angle of the wave's face, the changes in the canoe's tilt. These tactile cues were critical in maintaining balance and direction. Maika's body acted as a sensor array, detecting the slightest change in the swell's shape and timing. This embodied knowledge allowed the crew to respond instantly, adjusting their efforts and course to meet the ocean's demands. The journey also underscored the importance of trust in oneself, in one's companions, and in the ocean itself. Maika's relationship with the hollow of the wave was one of mutual respect. He listened attentively, interpreting its signals without trying to impose control, moving with the flow rather than against it. This approach was deeply rooted in Polynesian cultural values, where harmony with nature was paramount. The sea was not an adversary to conquer, but a partner to engage with thoughtfully and reverently. As they neared Huahin, the swell began to smooth again, the irregular patterns giving way to longer, more consistent waves. The hollow's rhythm slowed, a gentle pulse that carried the canoe steadily toward shore. Upon landing, Maika and the crew were greeted warmly by the islanders, who shared stories of their own experiences with the ocean's moods. These exchanges enriched Maika's understanding, adding new layers to his knowledge of the swell's language. In the evenings, under the canopy of stars, Maika would recount the day's journey, describing the swell's subtle changes and the strategies used to navigate them. The elders listened closely, encouraging reflection and discussion that deepened the community's collective wisdom. Through these shared stories and experiences, the knowledge of the hollow wave was passed down and expanded. It became a living tradition, adapting to new challenges and insights while honoring ancient roots. Maika's journey revealed that mastery of the ocean was not merely a technical skill, but a holistic practice encompassing physical, sensory, cultural, and spiritual dimensions. The hollow of the wave was a gateway to understanding the interconnectedness of all these aspects. This understanding had implications beyond navigation. It offered lessons about how to engage with the world at large, listening deeply, moving with awareness, and respecting the forces that shape our environment. Maika's story invites us to reconsider the ways we perceive and interact with nature. It challenges the dominance of visual information and encourages an embrace of other senses and modes of knowing. What if, by tuning into the less obvious languages around us, the subtle vibrations, the faint rhythms, we could gain new insights into the world and our place within it? The ocean's hollow continues its eternal dialogue, inviting those who listen to move gently with its flow and discover the wisdom held in its depths. The ocean's whispers grew louder to Maika's attuned senses as the voyage progressed into its 9th chapter. Each swell beneath the canoe carried a new message, a subtle variation that required delicate interpretation. The hollow of the wave was no longer just a guide. It had become a living dialogue between navigator and sea. The journey to the island of Taha presented new challenges. Known for its intricate reefs and variable currents, Taha demanded not only precise navigation, but also an intimate understanding of the ocean's moods. Maika approached this leg with a quiet confidence born of months of training, yet aware of the unpredictability inherent in such waters. As dawn broke, the crew launched their canoe onto the water, greeted by a calm sea and a sky streaked with soft pinks and blues. The early swell was gentle, a slow, undulating motion that seemed to cradle the canoe. Maika closed his eyes, tuning his senses to the hollow between waves, their timing, depth, and shape. This initial calm was deceptive. The ocean's surface, while smooth, concealed shifting energies below. Currents interacted with swells, and distant winds stirred the water in unseen ways. Maika's hands, resting lightly on the canoe's edges, felt these subtle shifts, sending silent signals to the paddlers to adjust their rhythm and course. Hours passed as they traversed the open ocean. The hollow of the wave remained a steady pulse beneath them, a rhythm that guided their progress. Yet Maika knew this constancy could change without warning. The ocean was a dynamic entity, capable of rapid transformation that could challenge even the most experienced navigators. Midday brought a noticeable change. The swell began to shorten and deepen, the hollows growing more pronounced. Maika sensed a distant wind pushing against the larger waves, creating a mosaic of patterns that required careful attention. The paddlers responded to his subtle shifts in posture and gentle taps on the canoe's frame, adjusting their strokes in harmony with the ocean's new rhythm. Navigating this complex swell demanded all of Maika's focus. The hollow of the wave was now irregular, its rhythm broken into sections that alternated between smooth and choppy. Each transition was a message, warnings of shifting currents, approaching weather changes, or submerged reefs. Maika's training enabled him to interpret these signs quickly. He knew when to signal for course adjustments, when to advise paddling harder against a rising wave, and when to ease into the swell's flow. His body acted as a living instrument, translating the ocean's language into movement and strategy. The crew's coordinated response allowed the canoe to maintain stability and direction, even as the sea grew more challenging. Maika's connection to the hollow of the wave became their anchor, a constant amidst the ocean's variability. As afternoon wore on, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, signaling an approaching storm. The swell's hollow deepened further, the troughs between waves lengthening as the wind intensified. Maika's senses heightened, detecting these shifts before they became visible to the eye. The storm brought sudden gusts and heavy rains, reducing visibility and increasing the sea's volatility. Navigating in these conditions required Maika to rely almost entirely on his tactile connection to the ocean. The hollow of the wave was their lifeline, a steady beat beneath the chaos that kept the crew aligned and focused. The canoe rose and fell with the storm's energy, pitching sharply at times and gliding smoothly at others. Maika's hands gripped the sides firmly, feet steady against the deck, muscles responding instinctively to each movement. His breathing slowed and deepened, maintaining calm and clarity amid the tumult. Despite the storm's ferocity, the crew remained steady, their movements synchronized through trust and shared experience. The hollow of the wave, felt rather than seen, was their guide through the storm's unpredictable embrace. When the tempest passed, the ocean gradually calmed and the sky cleared. The crew allowed themselves a moment of quiet relief, grateful for their safe passage. Yet Maika's mind remained alert, reflecting on the ocean's lessons and the profound connection that had carried them through. Back on shore, the islanders welcomed the voyagers warmly, eager to hear of their journey and the challenges faced. Maika shared detailed observations of the swell's changing patterns, the storm's impact, and the strategies that had ensured their survival. The elders nodded in understanding, recognizing the depth of knowledge conveyed through Maika's account. His experience expanded the community's collective wisdom, reinforcing the importance of listening to the ocean's subtle cues and respecting its power. Maika's story inspired renewed interest in the art of non-visual navigation. Apprentices began practicing with greater focus on tactile and sensory awareness, exploring how to deepen their connection to the hollow of the wave and the ocean's many voices. The journey to Taha underscored the essential qualities needed for successful navigation: patience, attentiveness, humility, and the willingness to embrace uncertainty. Maika's example demonstrated that these qualities, combined with careful training and respect for nature, could overcome even the most daunting challenges. As night fell, Maika sat by the shore, listening to the gentle swell against the rocks. The ocean's hollow whispered its eternal rhythm, a reminder of the enduring bond between sailor and sea. What further mysteries would the hollow of the wave reveal? How might Maika's journey continue to expand the horizons of navigation and human perception? The sea's dialogue remained open, inviting those who listened deeply to participate in its timeless dance. Micah's journey through the vast and unpredictable ocean deepened with each passing day. His connection to the hollow of the wave, once a fledgling skill, had matured into a profound form of communication between sailor and sea. This connection was not merely physical, but woven with threads of history, culture, and reverence, drawing from generations of navigators who had learned to listen with more than just their eyes. The ocean that morning greeted them with a calm surface, a deceptive stillness that often preceded more complex conditions. The crew readied the canoe, feeling the subtle swell beneath their feet and hands. Micah closed his eyes, focusing on the hollow, the space between waves where the ocean's pulse revealed its true character. As they set off toward the island of Raiatea, Micah's senses stretched wide, ready to interpret every nuance. The swell was gentle, long, and rolling, carrying with it distant energies from storms far across the Pacific. This vast connectivity of the ocean was a reminder that no voyage was isolated. Each wave was part of a greater system, a living network of forces and influences. Hours into the journey, Micah detected a subtle change in the swell pattern. The hollow between waves began to deepen slightly, the rhythm shifting in a way that suggested the approach of a local wind. His hands and feet, finely attuned to these shifts, sent signals to the paddlers, guiding their strokes to align with the changing pulse. The wind soon picked up, blowing steadily from the southeast. This introduced a new layer of complexity as the wind-driven waves intersected with the longer, distant swells. The hollow of the wave became irregular, sometimes shallow and rapid, other times deep and slow. Navigating this mosaic required careful attention and fluid adjustment. Micah's training enabled him to distinguish the components of the swell, recognizing the interplay between the wind waves and the underlying swell. This understanding was crucial in maintaining balance and direction. The paddlers, guided by Micah's subtle cues, adapted their strokes and body positions, moving as one with the sea. Midway through the journey, dark clouds gathered, and a distant rumble of thunder echoed across the horizon. The ocean's pulse quickened, the hollow deepening in response to the intensifying weather. Micah's body responded instinctively, shifting weight to counter the canoe's movement, communicating adjustments to the paddlers with gentle taps and shifts. The storm approached rapidly, and soon rain began to fall in heavy sheets. Visibility dropped, and the sea grew restless. The hollow of the wave was now a turbulent force, with the troughs between waves lengthening and the crests rising sharply. Micah's connection to the swell became their lifeline, a tactile guide through the chaos. Navigating in the storm tested every ounce of Micah's skill and composure. The canoe pitched and rolled, and the paddlers worked in unison to maintain stability. Micah's hands gripped the edges firmly, feet planted to resist sudden shifts, muscles engaged in a continuous dance of balance and control. Despite the storm's ferocity, Micah remained calm, his breath steady and mind clear. The hollow of the wave was a steady rhythm beneath the turbulence, a constant to hold on to amid the unpredictability. It was a reminder of the ocean's dual nature, both a source of challenge and a giver of life. As the storm passed, the sea gradually calmed, the swell returning to its long, rolling pattern. The crew allowed themselves a brief moment of respite before resuming their course. Micah's thoughts turned to the cultural significance of such storms, events woven into the oral histories and navigation chants passed down through generations. These stories told of respect and caution, of understanding the signs and honoring the power of the sea. For Micah, they were not mere tales, but living wisdom, guiding his every decision on the water. The remainder of the journey unfolded under clearer skies, but Micah remained vigilant, attuned to every ripple and hollow. He practiced sensing the swell's subtle variations, refining his ability to predict shifts before they manifested. As they neared Raiatea, the swell smoothed once more, the hollow becoming a gentle, steady pulse. The island's silhouette emerged on the horizon, a familiar sight that brought comfort after days at sea. Upon landing, the community welcomed the crew warmly, eager to hear of their experiences and challenges. Micah shared detailed accounts of the swell's changing patterns, the storm's impact, and the techniques used to navigate safely. The elders listened intently, their eyes reflecting respect and approval. Micah's growing mastery of the hollow of the wave was seen as a continuation of ancestral knowledge, adapted to contemporary challenges but rooted firmly in tradition. The community gathered for evening stories and reflections, where navigation was discussed not only as a practical skill, but as a spiritual journey. The ocean was a teacher, a guide, and a source of identity. The hollow of the wave was its language, spoken through sensation and intuition. Micah's journey illustrated the richness of this tradition. It showed that navigation extended beyond charts and stars, encompassing a holistic awareness that included the senses, culture, and reverence. The lessons from the hollow of the wave reached beyond the ocean. They spoke to how humans might live in harmony with the natural world, respecting its rhythms and responding with humility and grace. As night fell and stars glittered overhead, Micah stood on the shore, feeling the swell's gentle pulse beneath his feet. The ocean whispered its eternal stories, inviting him to continue learning, listening, and moving with its endless dance. What new insights awaited in the hollow of the wave? How might this ancient knowledge continue to evolve, bridging generations and expanding human connection to the sea and each other? The journey was ongoing, the sea's rhythm a timeless companion on the path of discovery. The lessons Micah absorbed during his apprenticeship extended far beyond the immediate physical challenges of the ocean. They penetrated the deeper realms of human experience, the relationship between knowledge and intuition, the bond between community and environment, and the quiet power of paying close attention to the world's subtle signs. Navigating by the hollow of the wave was not simply about survival or technical skill. It was an exercise in mindfulness, an embodiment of presence and respect. Micah's daily practice involved listening, not only with his ears but with every fiber of his being, to the ocean's ever-changing voice. The ocean's pulse was like a slow heartbeat, its hollow between waves a space where stories were told and secrets kept. Through this rhythm, Micah learned to anticipate shifts in weather, currents, and the sea's moods long before they became visible. This knowledge was vital not only for safe passage, but also for honoring the ocean's temperament. Each voyage was a dialogue, a negotiation between human intention and natural forces. Micah's role was to mediate this interaction, translating the ocean's subtle cues into guidance for his crew. This responsibility carried with it a profound sense of humility and stewardship. The crew's trust in Micah grew steadily, bolstered by his increasing ability to interpret the swell and respond appropriately. Their shared experience forged a strong bond, a collective awareness that transcended words. Together, they navigated through calm seas and storms, learning from the ocean and from each other. On one voyage toward the island of Maupiti, Micah faced a particularly challenging swell. The hollow was irregular, the waves choppy and unpredictable, shaped by the interplay of local winds and distant storms. The canoe rocked with sudden shifts, demanding constant adjustment and vigilance. Micah's hands remained steady, his body attuned to every nuance. He signaled to the paddlers through a series of gentle taps and shifts, coordinating their movements to align with the hollow's changing rhythm. The crew responded with practiced precision, maintaining balance despite the sea's turbulence. This journey underscored the importance of flexibility and adaptation. Micah realized that while knowledge of the ocean's patterns was essential, so too was the willingness to respond creatively to its unexpected moods. The hollow of the wave was not a fixed code, but a living, shifting language. After hours of navigating the challenging swell, the sea gradually smoothed. The hollow returned to a slow, rolling pulse, and the canoe glided steadily toward Maupiti's shore. The sense of relief was palpable but tempered by a deep respect for the ocean's power and unpredictability. Upon arrival, the islanders welcomed the crew with ceremonies that honored the sea and the navigators. These rituals reinforced the spiritual dimension of ocean travel, connecting the physical journey to cultural identity and ancestral heritage. Maika participated in these ceremonies with gratitude, understanding that his role as a navigator was part of a larger story, a story that connected past, present, and future generations. The nights on Maupiti were filled with storytelling and reflection. Elders shared accounts of voyages long past, the challenges faced, and the wisdom gained. Maika listened intently, absorbing lessons that complemented his own experiences. One story recounted the journey of an ancestor who, centuries before, had navigated solely by the ocean's feel, without the aid of stars or landmarks. This ancestor's success had been attributed to an extraordinary sensitivity to the hollow of the wave, a gift that Maika now recognized as central to his own training. This connection to ancestry deepened Maika's sense of purpose. He was not merely learning a skill, but participating in an ongoing legacy, a living tradition that embodied resilience, adaptability, and profound respect for nature. The following days involved continued practice and community engagement. Maika taught younger apprentices the basics of sensing the swell's hollow, encouraging them to develop their own awareness and patience. These lessons emphasized that mastery required time and dedication, a gradual unfolding rather than a sudden revelation. In his private moments, Maika reflected on the challenges of translating such subtle knowledge into teaching. The hollow of the wave was not something easily conveyed through words or demonstrations. It required experience and embodied understanding. This realization reinforced the importance of apprenticeships and the transmission of knowledge through shared experience. The oral traditions, the rhythms of the ocean, and the community's cultural practices all combined to create a rich learning environment. Maika's role as both student and teacher highlighted the cyclical nature of knowledge, where learning and sharing were intertwined. Each journey added new layers to his understanding, which he then passed on to others. As his apprenticeship neared its conclusion, Maika felt a growing sense of responsibility. The ocean's hollow was a sacred trust, a language that connected humans to the natural world in a way that demanded care and reverence. He contemplated the future, wondering how these ancient practices could survive in a rapidly changing world. Modern technology offered new tools, but Maika saw value in preserving the old ways, the deep sensory awareness and cultural wisdom embedded in navigating by the swell. These questions lingered as Maika prepared for the next stage of his journey, one that would test his skills, resilience, and understanding in unforeseen ways. The ocean's hollow continued to beckon, a silent yet persistent guide through the endless expanse. The path ahead was uncertain, but Maika's connection to the swell grounded him, offering both direction and solace. In this connection lay the promise of discovery, growth, and an enduring dialogue with the sea. As Maika's apprenticeship drew to its natural close, he stood on the cusp of a transformation that was both deeply personal and profoundly communal. The hollow of the wave, once an abstract concept taught through stories and cautious guidance, had become a living pulse beneath his skin, a steady rhythm that spoke in whispers and surges, in moments of calm and bursts of fury. This rhythm was the very language of the ocean, a language that Maika had learned not merely to understand, but to embody. The final voyage, a journey from the island of Maupiti back to his home island, was to be both a test and a celebration. The sea stretched out before him in endless expanse, its surface shimmering under the rising sun. Maika prepared with a quiet focus, aware that the ocean's moods could shift without warning, that every swell carried its own story, every hollow its unique message. Setting out in the early morning, the crew moved with practiced ease, their strokes synchronized with the hollow of the wave. The swell was gentle at first, a slow and steady pulse that seemed to cradle the canoe in a tender embrace. Maika closed his eyes, letting the rhythm wash over him, feeling the subtle rise and fall beneath his hands and feet. The journey unfolded as a dialogue, a dynamic exchange between human and nature. Maika's senses remained sharp, attuned to every variation in the swell's pattern. The hollow deepened and lengthened, then softened and shortened, a dance of waves shaped by distant storms and local winds. His body responded instinctively, shifting weight and adjusting posture to maintain balance and course. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher, casting a golden glow over the water. The crew's trust in Maika's guidance was evident in their steady, confident paddling, their movements a physical echo of the ocean's rhythm. Together, they navigated through calm patches and gentle swells, always listening, always adapting. As they reached the midpoint of their journey, the sea began to change. The swell grew more complex, a mosaic of intersecting waves that challenged Maika's perception and skill. The hollow between waves deepened, the troughs becoming pronounced, signaling a shift in the wind and currents. Maika's connection to the swell intensified, his senses heightened as he read the ocean's subtle cues. The paddlers adjusted their strokes in response, guided by Maika's calm commands and fluid movements. The canoe rose and fell with the waves, pitching and rolling in a rhythm both ancient and immediate. A sudden gust of wind swept across the water, whipping up whitecaps and increasing the swell's intensity. The hollow deepened further, its rhythm quickening. Maika's body moved with the swell, counterbalancing the canoe's tilt, signaling the paddlers to brace and respond. The storm's approach was unmistakable, yet Maika's confidence remained unshaken. The tempest arrived with a roar, dark clouds blotting the sky and rain pelting the water's surface. Visibility shrank to near nothing, and the sea became a churning, unpredictable force. Navigating in this chaos demanded every ounce of Maika's training and intuition. The hollow of the wave, felt rather than seen, was their guide through the storm's relentless assault. The canoe was tossed violently, yet Maika's calm presence and precise commands kept the crew focused and coordinated. They moved as one, responding to each swell and dip, each hollow and crest. Their collective energy aligned with the ocean's fierce pulse. Hours passed in this tumultuous dance. The storm gradually spent its fury, and the sea began to calm. The hollow softened, returning to its gentle, rolling pattern. Exhausted but triumphant, the crew pressed on, the island's silhouette emerging faintly through the mist. Landing safely on familiar shores, Maika felt a profound sense of completion. This journey, like all those before it, had been a dialogue with the ocean, a conversation that demanded respect, patience, and humility. The hollow of the wave had been his teacher, his guide, and his companion. The community gathered to welcome them home, celebrating the successful voyage with songs and stories. Maika shared his experiences, the lessons learned from the ocean's rhythms, the challenges of the storm, and the delicate balance between human will and natural forces. Elders nodded in approval, recognizing that Maika had become a true bearer of the tradition. His journey embodied not just skill, but the spirit of navigation, a deep listening, a harmonious movement, and a reverence for the sea's enduring mystery. In the days that followed, Maika reflected on the significance of his apprenticeship and the knowledge he now carried. The hollow of the wave was more than a navigation tool. It was a metaphor for life itself, the spaces between moments, the rhythms that shape existence, the need to remain present and adaptable. He considered how this ancient wisdom might find its place in a world increasingly dominated by technology and speed. Could the subtle art of sensing the ocean's hollow inspire a renewed respect for natural rhythms, for patience, and for the interconnectedness of all things? Maika's thoughts drifted to future generations, the apprentices yet to come. He felt a responsibility to pass on not only the techniques, but the deeper understanding of what it meant to listen and respond with humility. The ocean, he knew, would continue to speak its language, its hollow a timeless invitation to those willing to hear. Maika's journey was but one chapter in a continuing story, a story of human resilience, connection, and the enduring dance with the sea. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the island, Maika stood by the shore, feeling the gentle swell beneath his feet. The hollow of the wave whispered its eternal rhythm, a reminder of the past, a guide for the present, and a promise for the future. What new voyages would unfold in the silent spaces between waves? How might the lessons of the hollow continue to shape lives, guiding sailors and dreamers alike through the vast and ever-changing ocean of existence? The sea's language remained, ever patient and profound, waiting for the next attentive listener to step into its embrace. The ocean's hidden rhythms whispered their secrets without sight, revealing a world beneath the waves felt more than seen. But the sea's stories don't end there. Beyond the swell lies another language, written in shells scattered on the shore, cast in shadows dancing beneath the reef's surface. Now, we dive deeper into this quiet world, where every shape and shimmer tells a tale, waiting to be discovered by those who know how to listen.